Good morning, everyone, and welcome to VLOOKUP via spreadsheets. I am going to show you through Excel today. So, in your email with the Zoom link, I did send you two demo files. They were just quick, random things. So, if you do want to follow along, feel free to use those. I am recording, so if by some chance you do have to drop off, you can continue wherever you left off, and hopefully the rest of the group will join us. But we are going to look at using VLOOKUPs, which is an Excel formula. It's a type of function that does a vertical lookup. So we're going to look at a few things before we jump into Excel. So, like I said, VLOOKUP stands for vertical lookup. You might also hear some other ones that um, in formulas called HLOOKUP, which would be horizontal. So it's looking across instead of up and down. But a majority of what we do, we're comparing data. We have student data, student IDs. So we're typically doing a VLOOKUP. And then there's also one called XLOOKUP. This is where you can do multiple tasks during the lookup process. But again, we are just going to focus on VLOOKUPs today, and we are just going to focus um, on Excel. So if you hopefully you have Excel. If you don't have Excel, you can definitely use Google Sheets. Google Sheets is also an option for this. Give me 1 second. I do not have Rebecca today to help me with the chat, so I will be checking the chat. Um, If you do have a question and I miss it, please make sure you unmute and stop me so I can get your question answered. So you will hear a couple different words when you're talking about spreadsheets. You'll hear function, you'll hear formula. So VLOOKUP is a function, so it's going to do the vertical lookup, and then you're going to type in the formula. So that's the process of what everything does. Um, and what the VLOOKUP does is it searches for a unique value. So it's useful for data retrieval and comparison tasks. So, you know, and hopefully we'll get time at the end. We can do easy queries, and you can pull from two different spreadsheets. So instead of trying to retype things or, regenerate something or copy and paste a million times, you can use the VLOOKUP to do that comparison. So again, what it does is it allows you to merge that data between the two different reports using a unique identifier that they both share. So a good example for us in Dazzle is our student IDs within our district or the SSID. We can't use names because think about how many people have Miller or Troyer or things like that. So we have a lot of those names within our district. So that's not a unique identifier. And then, of course, first name, same thing. We have multiple people with the same first name. So the syntax for setting up your VLOOKUP. So right at the top up here, you'll see this is what the formula will look like. So a formula always starts with an equal sign. So that is what tells the spreadsheet, whether you're in Excel or you're in Sheets, that you are going to put in some type of formula. So our VLOOKUP is our function. So our first area is our lookup value. So in this case, it is C2. It is what you want to search for. So what do you want to find in this other spreadsheet that you have? So you have two spreadsheets that you'll work with. Your main spreadsheet where you want the new information to come, and then you have what is called the source spreadsheet. That's where you're getting the data from. And I gave you two of those. You'll see if you did open up those Excel files that I gave to you, one has student names and one only has student IDs. So that's kind of how I labeled them, but then you can see the difference. One has the unique, or they both have the unique identifier, but the one also has those names. But so what do we want to look up? That is your unique identifier. So in the case of our generic spreadsheets, that's going to be our student ID. The table array is the range of cells that contain the data that you want to search for and that you want to populate. This should not contain any column headings. So if you have column headings at the top for first name, last name, student ID, address, whatever it might be, you do not want to include those words in the range. Also, the first column of your range has to have that unique identifier. And again, we're going to go through all this so you can see how it's set up. But so think of the range of cells, think of the table that you're looking in. So the source spreadsheet or that second spreadsheet where you want to get the data from. Then the next area right here is the column that you want to retrieve the value from. So, for example, if you are, looking at addresses, but you have a separate spreadsheet that has phone numbers and you want to pull the phone number in, what column would the phone number be in? And it doesn't want the A, B, C, or D as it's labeled across the top in all spreadsheets. It wants the number. So column B would be 2, column C would be 3, and etc. And then our last area, we are almost always going to use false. So false means that you want an exact match. If you use true, it's an approximate match. So you wouldn't want an approximate match of a student ID. You'd be like, if it's 1 or 2 numbers off, it's okay. No, it's not really okay because we want that exact match of that student ID. So in that case, if you want the exact match, it will always be false. So again, this looks like a lot and it looks like a lot of gibberish, but once you break it down and use the insert function feature, it's very helpful and you'll be able to just plug those things in. But again, what you're looking up, where you're looking to find that information, what data you want to populate, and then you want the exact match. Okay. So, and this kind of breaks it down a little bit more. Um, you can see here when you are looking at the table array, again, the first column must have that unique identifier for the lookup value. So be cautious of that. And I'll show you how to move columns easily. If, for instance, you're getting something from Easy Query, it might not put the student ID in the first column. Okay. So a VLOOKUP could be used on the same sheet. So the sheet that you're looking at, you can have a separate little table on there that you want to pull data. Maybe you have, 500 kids and you want to pull out a little bit of data. You can have the VLOOKUP right there on that sheet. You can have it within the same workbook, but a different sheet. So sheet 1 or sheet 2. So we can have multiple sheets at the bottom or they could be completely different spreadsheets. And that's what we're going to look at today. I have two different spreadsheets that we're going to look up. Everything that we're going to do today with the formulas are exactly the same in Google Sheets as it is in Excel, except for linking different spreadsheets. So I did provide this YouTube video, and I will give you guys this uh, slideshow when we're done. So you'll have a link to that. But you do have to have an import function also included in your VLOOKUP. So this YouTube video gives you step by step, and then in the comments area of the YouTube video, there's a link, and if you click on that, then it has the written directions on how to do the different spreadsheets for Google Sheets. Again, this is only for Google Sheets. So we are going to look at using the function box because I'm assuming most of you joined today because this is your first time working with VLOOKUPs or it's very new to you. So using the function box allows you to, it kind of tells you everything that you need to do. Can you still type in the VLOOKUP function? Of course you can, but this is kind of like it's kind of like a cheat way to get all the information that you need without missing anything. So if you click on your function button and the VLOOKUP is not listed here, you can just search for it right here. Once you use it one time, typically it does populate it in this list here. This just shows the last few things that you've used. So again, you can always search for it, or if it's listed here, you can click on it. So once you do that, you'll see it automatically puts the equal sign because that's how a formula starts. And then it'll pop up a new box to say, okay, like, what are you looking for? Okay, so this is how everything is set up. So this is your function box. So it's going to have all the arguments that you need for your formula. So the first one is that lookup value. What are you searching for? Okay, and you can see as it's in this box, it actually puts it in the formula. But this is the spreadsheet that I gave you. So you have to have that unique identifier. So in this case, we are going to use our student ID number because that is unique. There's no duplicates there. There shouldn't be any duplicates in our system. Then next is the table array. What table you want to merge the data from. Okay, so, and of course, this is giving me an error, but whether it is on the same sheet that you're in, whether it's a different sheet, so if you have a sheet number 2 down here, or if you're going to a completely different spreadsheet. The difference or the only important thing is whatever table you select, remember the first column has to have the unique identifier that you looked up in this first area here. Next is our column number. So what column is this information from? Okay. So when I'm looking at my second spreadsheet, if I'm trying to populate a phone number, whatever column that phone number is in. And then our range lookup, and again, 99.9% of the time we are going to use false because that true is an approximate. So you can see here I have a gap between my 109 and my 222. So if my lookup range was 2 and I was looking up a value, say 112, it might populate 222 or it might populate 109. So it's just an approximate. So that's why you want to use false so it finds that lookup value identically. And then if you are trying to find 112 and 112 was not available, you would see an NA that it's not there. And I have a list of those here in a few minutes. So this is kind of breaking it down with real data. So my lookup value, so I'm looking at my student ID here, which then populates the cell number. So it is, or cell address, it's C2. Could you put in the actual student ID number? You could. You could type in 101, but then it's harder to copy the formula because that's specific and it stays the same. Whereas if I use the cell address, then when I copy down, it's going to go to C3, C4, C5, and so forth. My table array. So I am going to my second spreadsheet. So it says it's going to my VLOOKUP sheet 2, which that's what I called the document. And then I selected from A2 all the way to E12. I think that's what it says. Um, and then you can see, you can't see E on here, but you would select everything or E22. So you would select it all. Notice that my identifier, my unique identifier is in the first column, in column A. Okay. And again, I'll show you if your information is not there, how you can move things back and forth. And then again, our last one is always false because we want an exact match. Here are some errors that you might see or issues. So if you're trying to troubleshoot or if you're seeing something, like I said, you might see that NA. That just means the value was not found. So for example, if I was trying to find the student ID of 112, it was not there. So it's going to populate an NA. Okay. So, there might be things such as typos or something, or maybe there wasn't anything in the source file that to populate into the primary file. So, it could be something like that. In the example I have later, it will show you a lot of NAs because there's not a lot of data in there. A reference error indicates the column index number, so that 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 is greater than the number of columns in the array. So if you selected columns A, B, C, and D, you can only have a column index number of up to 4. If you say, hey, I want information from column 5, it's going to give you a reference error and say, hey, that's larger than what you selected. We can't pull any information from column 5. And then value, double check your formula, make sure everything is there, make sure all your parentheses are there, your commas are there. If there's something that's not that's hasn't been typed incorrectly, make sure your table array is selected properly from the first cell to the last cell. Typically, your value error means there's something wrong with the formula. Okay, so those are the three big ones that you'll see. So tips, you since we're learning, use that insert function feature to guide you through. You can type in the formula on your own. You have to make sure that you have an open and a closing parenthesis. You also have to make sure that you have um, a a comma in between all the parts of the formula or the function arguments. So between, your lookup value, your table array, and so forth. If you're missing a comma, you're going to get that value error. Once you brought the information in to your spreadsheet, if you don't want to deal with the formulas anymore, you can cut the information and paste the values right back into the same cells. Then the information is stored there versus having the formula stored in that cell. So it makes it a little bit easier to work with the data, especially if you're going to do sorts and filters. So some of the normal features that we use in Excel. You can also use name ranges to make your formulas easier to manage. I am not going to use named ranges today, but I will show you how to name a range if you would like to use that feature. Okay, so let's get into Excel. Again, if you want to follow along, you're more than welcome to. I have sheet one, which includes the student names, the student ID, what program they're in, and one random favorite thing. Sheet two then has my student ID, no names, some of their favorites, and their status, whether they're all day, AM, PM, or remote learners. Okay. And can somebody give me a quick thumbs up? Can you guys see this okay? I don't want to make it too large because then we can't see all the data, but I want to make sure you guys can see this okay with the split screen. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So when we're looking at this, so for example, this is my primary, so this is my main spreadsheet. So I have the student names. This is what is called the source spreadsheet. This is where my unique identifier is also. I don't have student names or anything, but I want to pull the status of each of my students into my primary spreadsheet. So I'm going to add a new column heading here. I want status, if I could spell it correctly. Okay. And then this is where I am going to start my VLOOKUP. Okay, so I'm only going to do it for the first one and then I can copy it down. So I'm going to open up my function. So I'm going to click on the FX to insert my function, or my function box will open. So again, if VLOOKUP does not show up for yours, you can type VLOOKUP here and it will populate that. Or type it in, hit go, and it populates. Mine shows up because I've been working with it. So I'm going to click on it. And then here is my argument box. Okay. So the first thing, and this is nice because it lets you click and it will automatically populate the information in here. You can also click on this little up arrow if you want to minimize the function box so it'll make it a lot smaller. But for our purposes, I'm going to leave it open so you can see what it's doing. So the first is our lookup value. Well, I have to have that unique identifier. So our unique identifier is our student number. So I'm going to click on cell C2. So that's the first student ID number. Then my table array is coming from my source spreadsheet. So again, I can click on this to minimize it, but I can come over right to my source spreadsheet and I'm going to click and I'm going to drag and select everything. Now, notice I did not select my column headings. Do not include those column headings in there. Also notice column A has to have my unique identifier. So in order for it to find for these to match, source document has to have that unique identifier in column A or you will get an error message. Okay. And again, I'm going to do this backwards in a little bit so you can see how to move it. Then our next one is what column data do I want to retrieve? Okay, so I'm looking for the status. So I can't just put C, I have to count. So 1, 2, 3. So column C is column number 3. And then we said this last one should always be false because we want it to match identically. Okay, it needs to be an exact match. So I'm going to type in false. It is not case sensitive. It always shows true and false in capital letters, but it is not case sensitive. So now you can see as I was clicking on stuff, you can see it automatically created that formula in on the formula bar. Okay, so here's my lookup. Here is my spreadsheet name. That can get very long too, by the way, and the range. And then if I moved on, I'm not going to click on anything, but if I moved on, it would show column 3 and false. I'm going to click OK. And then you can see now it's matching these. So it's pulling in the status for student 101. Now, the nice thing is because I'm pulling from a different spreadsheet, it makes this an absolute reference, which means that table's not going to change. So then I can use my little fill handle in the bottom right corner. You can see how my mouse changes to the little plus, and I can click and I can drag down, and it's going to pull all that data in from all these students. Now, for example, you can see I have a shorter list in my primary spreadsheet, but you can see there's some over here as well. So for example, if I change, so for example, Samantha here, maybe her student ID changed. Her student ID is now 402. So if I change this to 402, watch column F. So as soon as I hit enter, it's automatically going to come over here and say, okay, I'm looking for 402, and that is a full day student. So as you update your value lookup, it will automatically update the column. Let me put that back so it makes a little bit more sense. Any questions with creating that formula? So then if you wanted to pull over other information, you could do the same. So it doesn't have to be just one column. You can do multiples. So if I wanted to bring over, their favorite application, so I would do the same thing. Now, again, I could start typing it in with the equal sign, VLOOKUP, open parenthesis, blah, blah, blah. But it's a little bit easier while you're learning to use that function box. So now I'll click on the VLOOKUP. Same thing. I want to look for my student ID, my table over here. Oop, it didn't go. There it goes. And then I am looking now at column D. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, column 4, and it is going to be false. So now you'll see that it populates the application, and you can see once I fill it, it fills that in for me. And if it changes over here, it will change on the other side as well. So maybe this student decided they are now switching to Magic School. And you can see now student 302 has changed to Magic School. So a tip, and I guess I should have put this on the tip sheet. I will update that. But a tip is if you are working with two different spreadsheets like this, keep them in the same folder. If they're in the same folder, then the link between the two stays the same. If you have them in multiple or two different folders, just know where those are, because if you do change the location of the folder, so if you change the location of one of them, it can break the link between those. Um, Lori, good question. So can you bring over two columns at the same time, for example, first name and last name rather than in a single column? You can't bring two of them over and merge them together. So because our spreadsheet has them in two separate columns, they would be in two separate columns. Um, but what you could do is merge them together first and then bring them over. But the VLOOKUP only looks at one column at a time. So your X lookup might allow you to do more of that, but I am not 100% sure. But I do know since it's in two columns, you would have to merge them together first. Because I'm assuming you're thinking bring this all over so it's in one column, or were you still thinking bring it over in two? So,
Hear me, Shelley?
yep, I sure can.
So a lot of our documents, like, you run a report and it has all the SSIDs listed, but then I need to know the names of the students. So I was just wondering in a different example, could you bring over two columns of data, but you had just mentioned you can only bring over one. So I think you answered the question.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
And I'll look at that a little bit more to see if you can bring them over like to get at the same time. But if you create your two, so watch this. So if you create your two, and it will pretend this is first name and last name. So if we're looking at the SSID, here's first name, here's last name. I created my two formulas, which they're very similar. The only thing that's different is this one is looking at column 3 and this one's looking at column 4. Once I have them created, I can drag down and then you can see it fills it in. So you're doing the formula twice, but you can fill all together. So hopefully that'll save you a little bit of time. Okay, so now we're going to go backwards. Okay, so now we're going to come over here to this document. So, oh, nope, I'm sorry. Yeah, yes, I'm confusing myself. Um, so we're going to come over here to this document. And on this document, we don't have what program they're in. So we know the student ID, we know their status, we know what application they're using, but we don't know what program they're supposed to be in. Are they in the good kids club, the bad kids club, the always late club, whatever club they're in? So we want to pull that in over here. But remember that I said when you're pulling in data, you have to have the unique identifier in the first column. And notice that this isn't in the first column. So there's a couple things that you can do. So actually, we'll use Lori's example. Maybe we want to pull over the first name and last name over here. Okay. So we want the first name. Um, we'll go back to that one. So let's stay with the program code. So let's go with the program. Okay. So in this case, if I do my function, my VLOOKUP, okay. So I want my unique ID or where I'm looking up. So my lookup value is my student ID, okay, my table array. Now, if I'm looking at this, and because I'm looking for the program code, I don't need first name, last name. I don't need status and application. So I can start with C and go over to my program code. And notice I'm only choosing column C, D, and oops, let's try that again. C, D, and E. So now my unique identifier is in column 1 that it's looking for. Okay. And then where's the program code located? So that would be column, this would be 1, 2, 3. Because remember, my table started with C, so that's 1, and then 2, and then 3. And then, of course, it is false. And then I'm going to click OK. So that worked. Okay, so that was perfect because of how I selected my range. But now I want the student's name. So I want their first name. Okay, so in this case, so if you look over here, my unique identifier is not the first column. So if I try to do this, we're going to get an error. So I want you to see the error, how it populates. So I'm going to do my VLOOKUP as I would, pick my unique identifier. My table array is going to include the first name, last name, okay, and the student ID. And then what column do I want to populate? Well, I want it to populate the first column, and then I want it false. So now when I do that, because column 1 is not my unique identifier, you're going to see I'm going to get that error. There's no information to come back. So what I have to do in my source document is move my column. And this is very common for easy queries, because if you choose an easy query and you choose first name, last name, and student ID, it populates the spreadsheet. Actually, I think it goes last name, first name, student ID. So you have to move the student ID column. So in order to do that, the easy way to do this, and I'm gonna erase this. So the easy way to do this is to select this entire column. So if I click on the letter C or up in that area, it selects the entire column. Now, if I right click, I'm going to cut. Okay, so I'm not copying, I'm cutting. It doesn't look like it did anything except it gives that scrolling marquee around it. So you know that it's waiting for something to happen. So now if I come over to column A and right click, notice I now have an option to insert the cut cells. So watch what happens to columns A and B and then where C gets placed. So now you can see it automatically scooted over first name and last name into columns B and C and put the student ID in column A. So now when I do this and I do my function for this one, so again, get my unique identifier, my table array, which my unique identifier is now in column A like it should, or column 1 like it should be. And then I want to pull in the first name. Hold on, let me go back. I think I did that wrong. Okay. And then column uh, 1, 2, and why am I getting a value error?
You didn't grab the whole range.
I thought I did. Well, let's go back in here. Let's erase this. Let's try that again. C2 to C26. Oh, is my mouse just like stopping? What is my mouse doing? Let's go this way. There it goes. Okay, so now you can see that it picks that first name. Okay. And then you'll notice, did you guys see this? So because those columns changed, notice it changed my program. So that's why it's important that once you have your information, you can copy and paste it so it's the value, so it doesn't keep changing like this if you're changing your columns around. So you're asking, well, how do you copy and paste it? So it's very simple. So notice these are all formulas. Okay, so everything's a formula in here. So if I select this, I can right click and you can copy or cut, it doesn't matter. So if I cut this, then if I right click back in the top one, so then I can paste. Oh, hold on. There. Sorry, you do have to copy. So then you'll see this one it says paste the value. So it takes away the formula and only pastes the results of the formula. So once I click on that, you'll see now that if I click on any of these, there's no longer a formula in there. However, if it's going to be an active worksheet and you're making changes, so for example, Ricardo here, student ID 101, he changed from AM and he changed to full day. Notice because it is no longer a formula, it will not update that primary document. So there's pros and cons to it. For example, a con would be that if you're changing columns around, it did change this formula. And it'll also, if you're updating things, it won't update once it's pasted. But, if you know you're going to be moving things around, you might want to copy and paste that value. If you're, especially if you're done with it, you're going to print it and now you're ready to start doing some sorting, filtering, whatever it might be. Um, you would want this as a value versus the formula. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to minimize these and I'm guessing student information logged me out, but we'll see. Oh, good. I'm still in there. So, when you're working in student information, most of your reports, so if you're running any of your R reports, most of them don't export to Excel nicely. Just because they have different column headings and some formatting issues and so forth. So you do have to spend a lot of time cleaning it up if you do export it to Excel. The reports are typically known for exporting as a PDF. Your analytics hub, they do populate in spreadsheets. Sometimes some of the reports you do have to clean up because there might be a wide column heading, sometimes progress book logos on there. You might want to clean that out. But the information is there in columns and rows. So you have your column headings and so forth. So there are some Analytic Hub reports that look nicely in Excel that you can work with. Your easy query reports, it's a student search, one that you can pull the data that you want. These export right into a CSV, so they're a functioning spreadsheet that you can use the VLOOKUP with. So you might have two different spreadsheets. Maybe your tech director gave you a spreadsheet with student names, student IDs, and email addresses, and you have a spreadsheet with student um, addresses, like their home address. Maybe it's for your seniors. So that's going to be our example. So we're going to look for seniors. We want to merge their addresses with their email address so we have all their contact information. So I'm going to go through this real quick. I don't need anything here, so we're just going to go to our filter. And notice in your easy query, you can use your ad hocs. So if you have any ad hoc memberships, you can pull those in. So we're going to do first name, last name. I'm going to use my student ID. There is also a way you can pull the SSID from your EMIS tab, but whichever you want, you can pull that in. But remember, you have to have that unique identifier. So first name and last name doesn't work, and typically birth date doesn't work because there are kids in the school that have the same birthdays. So just be careful with that. So I'm going to go next. Oops, sorry, not next. So if there's anything you wanted here, we're going to go to addresses. I am just going to do, um, and I'm not gonna select this. So we're gonna pretend this is a sheet that I already had. So maybe student phone number. And now what I'm gonna do is populate this as a CSV, download it, hit my finish. And yes, it gives it these crazy names. If you want to resave them, you can, or go into your downloads folder and give them rename them. Okay, so if you look here, here is my addresses for all my students and phone numbers and so forth. So then maybe I have a different spreadsheet. Like I said, maybe your tech coordinator gave you a spreadsheet with students, their IDs, and I didn't filter out my seniors. Oh, well, that's okay. We'll pull them in. Um, and you want to merge those together. So we're going to go. Um, this one. So I just want my seniors this time. So in this case, I'm going to do my email addresses. And you're going to see where a lot of these errors come up, the NA, because it's not available. So I'm going to say finish. So again, it's going to be a much shorter spreadsheet. So this has 50 where my last one had 130. Okay. So, and again, this is our demo database, our test district. So we don't have a ton of email addresses in here, but here are my students, my student number, first name, last name, student number, and their email addresses. Here's my original. Oh, and it populated over there. And then here is my source. Okay, so here's my original, here's my source. And I don't know if you saw what I did, but I have a split screen, so sometimes getting this one, it was putting it on my other screen. But if you just drag any of your open documents and touch it to the side, it will shrink it and make it half screen. So if I click on this to make it full screen, and then I just click and drag, and you can see how when I touch it, that little circle populates, and then it'll automatically half screen it. If you don't have another one that's half screen, it will populate all of the windows that you're working with. And hopefully you guys didn't see how many windows I had open. But then you can pick the one that you want on the other half. So it allows you to do that. So the first thing that I need to do, so I have these two spreadsheets. My primary, I don't care about, but this is my source one because I want to pull my email addresses over to my primary. Okay, so I'm going to add a column over here for emails. Okay. First thing I have to do is make sure that my unique identifier in my source file is in the first column. So I have to select my student number, right click. I'm going to cut that. I'm going to right click on column A and I'm going to say insert cut cells. And then it'll switch those. Now that I have my unique identifier in column 1, now I can proceed with my VLOOKUP. So in my primary, I'm going to click on my function, VLOOKUP. So where I'm looking is my student ID number. Table array is in my source document. I don't know why my mouse keeps doing that, but we'll go backwards. It worked last time. And they're finally plowing my road if you hear the snowplow going by. And then I want the student email, which is in column D. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So column 4. And then we want it to be an exact match. So I'm going to say, okay. Now you're saying, okay, well, it's coming up NA. What did she do wrong? I didn't do anything wrong. So remember in this one, I only pulled up, and I should have had their grade level listed so you can see. Remember, I only pulled up my seniors. So only the ones that are seniors or only ones that have data are going to show. So now when I copy this, so it will populate any that have an email address. Any that match that are in here, it gives a value of 0 saying that it was blank in my source file. And then NA means, okay, there wasn't a match between my primary and my source. So there's nothing available. So it's not a bad error. It's just telling me that there's nothing allowed. Okay, so as you get better with VLOOKUPs, you can always try adding extra things, such as if NA, which is a formula that you can use to say if it populates an NA, then you can put in your own wording. So not available or whatever you want to put. So, but those are additional functions that you can use as you get familiar with VLOOKUPs. And again, remember you can populate them right from within a spreadsheet. So I can make my own little table here and do a lookup. I can do it between two different spreadsheets within the same workbook, or I can do it with two different workbooks like we showed here. So any questions or comments or things that you were wondering about VLOOKUPs? I'm going to post this in the chat for you guys. It does look confusing at first, but like I said, if you're using that formula box, the function box, it helps you because it's kind of breaking down what you need. So, and again, you don't have to go back and forth between two different workbooks, but typically, when we're pulling stuff, you might be getting something from a building secretary, and somebody else is getting some. You've populated something, so you are typically working with two different workbooks. That's why I wanted to show that example. And again, I did post that, it's just, the quick little if you're a visual person, and then it's got the, little breakdown here, so that and share it with other people. So if you work with somebody that also is interested, please feel free to share with them. If you don't have any questions, I'll stick on for a little bit, but thank you very much. Hopefully everybody learned something about VLOOKUPs.